Michael, to continue our obsession with award season, we need to talk about The Brutalist.
Absolutely. It's an incredible, wholly original film from director Payday that explores the profound cost of pursuing the American dream.
It stars Adrian Brody as the architect Laszlo Toth, who escapes post-war Europe to arrive in America and rebuild his life, work, and marriage. On his own in a strange country, Laszlo settles in Pennsylvania, where the wealthy industrialist Harrison Lee Van Buren recognizes his talent for building, but power and legacy come at a heavy price.
It's a beautiful film that took 7 years to make and was ultimately shot in VistaVision over 35 days with a budget of under $10 million. And it's gone on to earn 3 Golden Globe wins, Best Director and both Best Actor and Best Picture in the drama category.
Now it's been nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including those we just mentioned, as well as Best Original Screenplay and Best Actor and Actress in Supporting Roles. It's showing in theaters everywhere. Happy Saturday. It's February 1st, 2025, and you are listening to Morning Meeting. I'm Ashley Baker in London.
And I'm Michael Haney in New York City.
While the world, Michael, is feeling very sorry for Americans, it's been a dizzying and dismaying week in Washington. First, as an American Airlines jet carrying 64 passengers collided with a U.S. Army helicopter and crashed into the Potomac River near Reagan National Airport. Meanwhile, in D.C. proper, Trump's reign of inanity continues as he freezes Medicare payments, forces remote workers back into the office, and subjects all of us to confirmation hearings for Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. When the New York Times feels like the onion, Michael, you know it's been a rough week. But as usual, Airmail and Morning Meeting are the antidote to all of that.
They sure are. And first, for seemingly forever, the dollar has been the sole currency of the United States. But under Donald Trump now, it seems cryptocurrency is challenging the dollar's supremacy. And Trump even has his own meme coin, of all things. But our writer, Jacob Silverman, is going to join us to explain why, by doing the bidding of crypto's boosters, Donald Trump has inadvertently revealed the industry's true face. And believe us, it's not pretty. Then, many of you know that our writer, Howard Bloom, has been doing outstanding work covering the story of Brian Koberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students. And he will join us with an update on the impending trial. And finally, Joanna Berkman is going to tell us about her exclusive interview with Alice Nderitu. As the former UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, she saw the cost of conflicts up close, and the longtime human rights activist discusses what she learned about how to solve them. It's a revealing conversation. So Ashley, where would you like to begin today?
Well, I think we have to start with cryptocurrency, Michael, because despite my best efforts to learn nothing at all about it, it seems like I still have to pay attention to this, despite the fact that cryptocurrency seems to have little intersection with the world that you and I actually live in. Jacob Silverman is here to tell us why it matters. He is the co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud. Welcome, Jacob.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jacob, of the dizzying number of shocking stories that have come out of Trump world this week, one of them asserts that he has become a crypto billionaire. How did this happen?
Well, it happened in a similar way, actually, that a lot of people make money or get rich off of crypto, or at least seem to, through basically a pump and dump scheme. Trump started a token called Trump, and it's called a meme coin or a shit coin, because a meme coin is just a token that's spun up in seconds, even if it costs almost no money to do it. And it is just designed to capitalize off of something in the news. You know, the Haktua girl had one, or you may remember the Peanut the squirrel that got sadly euthanized and was a media story a month or two ago. I mean, anything really that you can imagine has been turned into a meme coin, just kind of a useless digital token to speculate on. But in this case, the president did it. So it got a lot of attention. And he did it on inauguration weekend. And that's how the value of the token, or of the market cap of all the tokens out there, eventually rose to billions of dollars in theory. And we can talk about why those numbers aren't necessarily very real.
So, Jacob, who's buying these, as you so elegantly call them, shit coins? I mean, are these Trump superfans, like the same people who bought the golden sneakers?
I think a lot of them are. I mean, I think from Trump's point of view, this is just more sneakers and NFTs and watches. For a lot of people, it's something much different, I think, because this is clearly a channel for potential bribery and corruption on a scale we haven't really seen before. But I think it is mostly Trump fans. I think it's people who are already plugged into crypto mostly. I mean, there might be some new people being onboarded, but even people within crypto actually are a little divided on this because they've seen this kind of move before. This is a pump and dump. There's no real innovation or value here. And so I've actually heard from a lot of people in crypto who, while they might be pro-Trump and pro-crypto, but they're worried that this kind of will rob some folks and leave a bad taste in their mouth and not really help their industry.
Is it even legal?
Under normal rules, no, I would say. But these kinds of things happen hundreds or even thousands of times per day. The very prominent cases sometimes result in legal action or SEC lawsuits or settlements. I mean, Jake Paul and other influencers have had to pay fines related to pump and dump schemes, Kim Kardashian. So if we had a kind of a reasonable rule of law in this country, somewhat normal regulatory regime, or even the Biden regulatory regime, I think something would have been done about this. But there's a reason why Trump did it after the Supreme Court gave him immunity and right before he took office again.
I mean, Jacob, I've been trying to follow this, all of the news and developments in crypto since crypto first came on the scene. But here we are all these years later, and it still seems like crypto is just an investment tool to play with, right? Like it's gambling, pure and simple, it seems. I mean, we're still not able to use cryptocurrency to buy a coffee at Starbucks, right? Am I missing something?
No, not really. I mean, the use cases still aren't really there. I mean, yes, there are different types of crypto accounts or cards that might convert your crypto into cash at point of sale or something like that. But no one's really doing that on a big scale. People aren't really using it as a currency or as spending money because it's so volatile in part. And what we've really seen is that all the use cases and innovation and even any productivity are for criminal uses. I mean, that's why we have ransomware. That's why we have the scourge of cybercrime, is because cryptocurrency allows those people to get paid. And so the industry has been struggling for years to find a use case to grow, to really scale towards the 1 billion users that they aspire to. And they haven't been able to do it on their own. Now they're hoping to do it with the government's help, because Trump is now a crypto entrepreneur like them. He's going to give them everything they want on the regulation side. And there may even be government money going into the crypto industry.
So, Jacob, as you just sort of touched on there, crypto comes in 2008. I feel like my mother, because I still don't understand it either. But, you're at this place where it was supposed to, revolutionize finance. And it was supposed to be, this kind of place where decentralized, trustworthy, a very alternative to Wall Street. And it came around after the crash of 2008. So what's the worst case scenario here if Trump leads America into using Bitcoin, crypto as a currency? What's the worst case here?
I think the worst case is that there's a major crash, which there always is in crypto. I mean, this is a boom and bust industry, much more so than sort of quote unquote natural capitalist boom and bust cycles. I mean, this is stuff that happens every 2 years, and there's daily price fluctuations and crazy volatility. And in 2022, we had a big collapse when FTX went down, Sam Bankman-Fried went to jail, a bunch of other fraudulent companies were exposed. But it hurt the industry and it hurt some individual retail traders and regular folks, but it wasn't a massive economic or economy-wide event. And I think the concern now is that you see a lot more real money going into crypto, institutional money. There's more sort of interpenetration with Wall Street. They need Wall Street money coming into crypto because there's not a lot of economic value there being created on its own. So the worry is that when this thing blows up again, or when the loans start being called in again, like they were in 2022, it's not going to just be crypto companies that are failing. It might be some Wall Street firms. It might be pension funds that are invested in Wall Street firms or in crypto. It could potentially lead to the kind of contagion, as they call it, that affects the wider financial system.
And does this mean it would be a loss for Trump as well if this blows up? Or has he sort of already made his money and he's good to go?
I would say a bit of both. I mean, unless he is a total fool or the people working for him, he has cashed out some. You will see big numbers thrown around that, he has $5 billion worth of Trump token or something like that. Once it's like money laundering. Once it's very similar to money laundering. Once you cash out, you're taking a haircut. But and hence the part where you dump on the retail traders in the pump and dump. But if they were smart at all, they would have sold a bunch of these tokens early on and then cashed out as much as they could into dollars. Once this whole system blows up, that will be a problem for Trump because he has a proliferating number of crypto businesses. He started just another one this week.
Jacob, you're pretty clear in your story, though. You say that, 14 years ago, crypto came out with this white paper, is going to, as we say, revolutionize all this stuff. But you say it's really only good for facilitating crime including political corruption at the highest levels?
Yeah, I think we've had a little while now to take stock of crypto as an industry and the various twists and turns. And they really, like I said, have not come up with that use case. But where we do see it thriving is in gray market or black market economies, facilitating sanctions violations, and really just moving money around or value around with very little oversight and evading normal banking laws and capital controls. That seems to be what crypto is about. And the industry will try to tell different stories about the future of finance or somehow financially empowering people. But that financial empowerment hasn't come. That revolution hasn't come. And at a certain point, I think we have to call it for what it is. And what we certainly saw in this last election is that an industry that is very economically unproductive, that doesn't do a lot or employ a lot of people or create a lot of wealth, was the top donor of any industry in the 2024 campaign cycle. I mean, several $100 million. And I think that says a lot about what crypto is and how it really, so far, it seems to be most useful for fomenting corruption.
Well, that's a cheerful note to end on. Jacob, thank you so much.
I am worried because we've never had an entrepreneur in chief, and we've never had a crypto entrepreneur as president. So things are going very quickly in the other direction.
All right.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
Well,
have a great weekend.
I wish you
Love talking to you.
I wish you well. Keep your money in dollars.
Take your money, go spend it now, have a good time because it's gonna, it's going sideways pretty soon.
I sure hope not, but we'll be careful.
Okay, well, Michael, if sleeping at night is a priority, you might want to skip through this next segment because Howard Bloom is here to tell us about the latest breaking news in the case of Bryan Kohberger. At Airmail, we know him as the mastermind of the Idaho student murders, but of course he's still on trial and has yet to be proven anything, so perhaps that's premature. Howard is here to set us straight. He is the author of several best-selling books, including When the Night Comes Falling, A Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders, and he has been in Idaho following this trial and this case as it unfolds. Welcome, Howard.
Good to speak with you.
So on November 13th, 2022, in the early morning hours, 4 University of Idaho students were fatally stabbed at their residence off campus in Moscow, Idaho. Here we are several years later, and Bryan Kohberger, a former criminology student, is on trial for those murders. And Howard, you've been covering this like no one else. Where does the case stand right now?
Well, the trial is finally scheduled. It's supposed to start in August. Jury selection starts July 31st. And in the 2 years leading to this trial, there have been a flurry of motions by the defense and the prosecution trying to get discovery information. And last week, in a courtroom in Boise, Idaho, there were interesting revelations, 2 actually dramatic revelations that could change the course of this case. These were, first, the FBI had been identified the suspect through investigative genetic genealogy. What that means basically is they take a speck of DNA and they try to build out a family tree by going to certain genetic websites that are available to anyone. However, the FBI had not been revealing precisely what they had done. And for 2 years, the Kohberger defense had been trying to get this information. They finally got it, and the elusive truth came out in court, and it's very damaging to the FBI. It seems the FBI, in their zeal to identify a suspect in this case, went into websites that are specifically prohibited from sharing their genetic information with law enforcement. What does this mean? It means that now the Kohberger defense team is trying to throw out all the search warrants that came out of this so-called poisonous tree. They're saying that the cell phone information on his car, his electronic devices, and most significantly, a cheek swab that was taken after his arrest should be thrown out. Will the judge buy this argument? He's been in court. He's been raising questions about it. However, he has not ruled against it. And in fact, he's delayed everything till mid-February to see if they should have a hearing whether to admit this. If he decides to impugn all those search warrants, an open and shut case becomes more open than shut. And this was just the first dramatic revelation in the hearing last week. The other revelation was arguably more stunning. It seems that blood was found on a handrail in the murder house. And this blood belongs to an unknown male. On a glove found outside the house There was also blood found by a second unknown male. When the judge heard this, he said, "Are you saying that there were other people involved besides Kohberger?" And the fact that accomplices are now a possible subject in this case is quite interesting. Kohberger's defense team is going to take this information they made clear in court and make a new hypothesis. They are going to say that the knife sheath that was left in the house, that this knife sheath had Kohberger's DNA on it. There's no denying that. They're going to say this was touched by Kohberger by these two unknown people who had left their blood in the house on a prior event, and they had planted, these unknown males had planted the knife sheath in the house. That's how they're going to argue for Kohberger's innocence. And it seems that the judge is now talking about there being accomplices involved. As someone who's been following the case, I have my own hypothesis, and again, it's unproven, and it's very speculative at this point. But let's say that Kohberger was indeed the killer. He sets out as a criminology student to create the perfect crime, and it is a perfect crime in the sense that there's no blood evidence against him, there's no murder weapon, there's no reason for the crime, except for this one mistake. He left the knife sheath behind. That's the only thing they really have to connect him. But what if when he was planning this crime, and again, this is hypothesis, I'm not stating this as a fact, he had planted the blood on the handrail. He had planted the blood on the glove outside the house, and these were planted to mislead the police. And they might have successfully done so if he had not committed that error, allegedly, of leaving the knife sheath in the sheets of one of the beds on the third floor of the house.
Howard, at this point, do we know anything at all about how Kohberger may have been initially connected to the victims, if at all?
What we know about it is fascinating. There is no known connection at all to any of the people involved in the house. There's no proof that he ever followed them on social media, that he ever spoke a single word to them. There is no proof that he's ever been in the house at any time. Literally, if he is the murderer, had committed the perfect crime except for this one thing, leaving the knife sheath behind, and this knife sheath allowed them to build out the case against him. However, if they can throw out the knife sheath DNA evidence, the case against him becomes very fragile.
If there's no known connection to the victims, is there any conjecture by you or anyone else about how these victims, he would have selected them?
Here's what I believe, and it's just a hypothesis. It's just, as you said, conjecture. He would frequently go to a restaurant in downtown Moscow called the Mad Greek. One of the victims was a waitress at that restaurant. Did he talk to her, Maddie Mogen, at the restaurant? Did he simply see her? Kohberger was a man whose obsessions grew easily in his mind. That's the story of his life. I think he didn't need necessarily to have any interaction with her for him to become obsessed with her beauty, her youth, her exuberance, and for him to begin to go by the house. But there's no proof on this. This is, at this point, just a hypothesis. And I think one can make the case that his victim all along was not to kill 4 students, but just Maddie Mogen. Because when he goes into the house, he goes right up to her bedroom. He doesn't stop on the second floor after he enters the house and go into the other bedrooms there. I think Maddie was his target. Everyone else was collateral damage.
This problem that the FBI, you kind of predicted this some months ago when we were speaking. Do you foresee any other problems coming down the road in this case before the trial opens?
I think the big problem that looms and is sort of hanging now as a specter over the entire case is the fact that this unknown blood has been found in the house. It was a party house, and you expect to find lots of fingerprints on the stair rail, for example. But blood on a stair rail, blood on a glove outside the murder house, this doesn't make sense. And the fact that it's still unknown. I mean, if it were any of the frat boys who come to the house always going in and out of the premises in this party house, clearly I believe the police could have tracked it down. But these two unknown male blood samples raise lots of questions. And I think the Kohberger defense team, which is quite able, it's led by Ann Taylor, a legal aid lawyer, we'll make the most out of this.
Well, Howard, no doubt you're going to continue to cover this as it unfolds throughout the summer and the fall. So we look forward to speaking with you again as the trial gets underway.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you, Howard.
Michael, to continue our obsession with award season, we need to talk about The Brutalist.
Absolutely. It's an incredible, wholly original film from director Payday that explores the profound cost of pursuing the American dream.
It stars Adrian Brody as the architect Laszlo Toth, who escapes post-war Europe to arrive in America and rebuild his life, work, and marriage. On his own in a strange country, Laszlo settles in Pennsylvania, where the wealthy industrialist Harrison Lee Van Buren recognizes his talent for building, but power and legacy come at a heavy price.
It's a beautiful film that took 7 years to make and was ultimately shot in VistaVision over 35 days with a budget of under $10 million. And it's gone on to earn 3 Golden Globe wins, Best Director and both Best Actor and Best Picture in the drama category.
Now it's been nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including those we just mentioned, as well as Best Original Screenplay and Best Actor and Actress in Supporting Roles. It's showing in theaters everywhere. Let's transition, Michael, to Joanna Berkman, who's here to talk to us about another advocate for victims by the name of Alice Nederitu. She was the United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, and she has some really interesting thoughts on how we should interpret the latest actions of Israel and Hamas and how history is going to be judging this conflict. Joanna is a writer at large for Airmail, and she has written several articles for us about Hamas in America as well. Welcome, Joanna. Okay, so Joanna, the ceasefire agreements between Israel and Gaza can be described at the very best as a fragile peace. And in the coming months and years, as we are determining what exactly took place, the word genocide is going to be bandied around quite a bit. And your story in the issue this week concerns one of the very few people in the world with the authority to label conflicts as such. Tell us a little bit about her.
Sure. Alice is from Kenya. She has spent her career mediating, working to resolve identity conflicts all over the world, some in Africa, some in Europe. She has her name on various peace agreements. She's done work in Ireland. She's done work in a number of African countries. She's also done work in Asia. And she is an expert in the subject of genocide, yes.
And most recently, she was with the United Nations. How did she end up there, and what was her role?
She is an Undersecretary General as the Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide in 2020 during the pandemic. She was the first woman in her role. And really, that role is focused on education and prevention, and that can take many forms. It's a role in which you sort of travel the world, visiting the sites of different conflicts, and you're looking at issues like hate speech, for example, which through research is very much linked to genocide. That actually is important and is something worthy of examination and trying to stop and deal with. Her office, she and her team would conduct all kinds of research, as well as do site visits, speak at conferences, put out statements. They also advise the Secretary General as one of the members, essentially, of his cabinet.
So as the conflict between Israel and Hamas has unfolded over the past few years, Alice was really in the hot seat, right? Like, people were looking at her to kind of determine what was happening. How did she respond?
Well, the one thing that's really important to note is, though she, in her position is sort of was the foremost expert in the world on this topic, genocide is something that's determined by courts of law. And as we talked about when I wrote about her last year, there's a very limited number of ethnic conflicts that have been determined as genocide by courts of law. And the first one, the one off of which the Genocide Convention was created, was the Holocaust. So that is looked to as the hallmark event for this, and a genocide being something where one is trying to destroy, an entire group of people with the intent to destroy them. You are killing them in whole or in part. So she's the expert on the topic. She's not the person who, makes the ultimate determination should the word be used. But what happened here, and I think, it's important to understand it's not random that there was so much pressure against her at the UN to use the term. In her view, these are people who overstepped their bounds. It's not up to other members of the Secretary General of the UN's cabinet to use the term genocide. That is a determination that'll be made And as we know, South Africa has taken Israel to court over the issue, and that will be determined by the International Court of Justice in The Hague. However, what's really important to understand is that's a UN court. So if all the senior officials who work at the UN start saying this is a genocide, which they have, with the exclusion of Alice, that could be perceived as a pressure campaign to influence the judgment of the court, which is also part of the UN. And, what's important to understand with Alice, her not labeling this war a genocide was not an act of defiance or part of any other kind of political campaign. She feels it's not her place to determine it, and that these other people who have gone around and used the word again and again and again have diminished the value of the word and are seeking to influence the ultimate ruling that will come down, whether that's this year or in the next couple of years, because typically these kinds of rulings take many years.
So what happened to her as a result of her stance on this matter? I mean, it seems like she was put in a terribly unfair position.
Yes. From the war began, as we know, on October 7th. I think she put out her first statement on October 15th. And that very evening, she received an email from a civil servant at the UN, politely, but essentially attacking her statement and saying that she needed to fall in line with the other UN officials because there was such, sort of a jump on this bandwagon of genocide from the very, very beginning. The war is horrific. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have died. That is absolutely horrible. That is not anyone could see that. But from the very beginning, 8 days into the responsive war to this attack, she was being pressured. In this email that this man sent who works at the UN, he CC'd her peers, the other members of the Secretary General's cabinet. No one responded. No one said, wow, you're really out of line. Like, that's not something, and the UN is a very hierarchical, bureaucratic organization. And, it was just astonishing that a junior staffer would send such an email. And then it was not long after that a more official campaign against her, done by anonymous people who essentially took up that mantle and went public with this campaign. They wanted her investigated. They wanted her fired. Now, none of those things happened. What did ultimately happen is her contract was not renewed by the Secretary General.
Joanna, you also mentioned, speaking about being optimistic, that, even Alice herself is, despite all the pressure and the position she's in, points to what the United Nations did with the war in the Balkans in 95, 96, which was a horrific, ultimately, crime against humanity and ruled a genocide, but it took a long time to get there, right? So that's sort of what she points to, right?
Yes, and what she also points to is the fact that in the end, that war came to an end not because of the involvement of the UN per se, but because of Richard Holbrooke, who came in and got the job done. And I think, it'll be interesting to see, the war, now there's this ceasefire and the return of some of the hostages. It'll be interesting to see, though, going forward, what the final resolution will be. And, will it be an institution that helps, or will it be someone who comes in? As we know, I don't know much about Steve Witkoff, but it does seem that he was quite fundamental in bringing Israel and Hamas to the ceasefire and the return of the hostages.
Joanna, what does Alice's story tell us about how exceptionally polarized this issue still is, and where we're supposed to make sense of all of it? And how do we make sense of these incredibly heightened feelings around the issue?
It's an excellent question. She just returned, she was just at Auschwitz this week. Monday was the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It was the commemoration of that. She has not spoken out on this topic since leaving her post, or being, since her term ran out and it was not renewed. And this interview with me is the first time she's speaking out. I think she was inspired to do so publicly because she went to this commemoration and she gave a speech to a small group. And what she spoke about was to understand that the term genocide came about because of the Holocaust, that the Holocaust is central to it, and that, when you throw the term around, you're essentially confusing everybody about what it is. It is not the term for a war that is hell. All wars are hell to varying extents. Horrible things happen in war. Some have mass casualties, some have smaller amounts of casualties, but not all wars are a genocide. And I think it's really part of a bigger picture where even within the academy itself, the term genocide at universities, there is really the academic underpinnings of it came from the Holocaust. There is this push to sort of cut it off from that and use it in a much broader way. And I think she would say, as she said at Auschwitz this week, that is a very, very dangerous game. And then that can have, very detrimental consequences, especially all of this is unfolding as we see this incredible global rise in anti-Semitism and hate speech against the Jewish community. And so I think we have to be very skeptical when we see the term tossed around in such a way.
Well, Joanna, thank you so much. I mean, this is such an incredibly thoughtful story and also an issue that I think a lot of people are not paying attention to. So thank you so much for bringing it to light and for speaking with Alice and sharing her experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here as always.
There's only one place to discover a global snapshot of the current cultural scene. Airmail's Arts Intel Report. Our international research tool for what to do and where and when to do it is user-friendly, continuously updated, and meticulously curated. Arts Intel is handy at home, on the road, and when you're planning your next trip. It also includes indispensable lists of restaurants and hotels in key cities around the world, recommended by our well-traveled experts. Explore Arts Intel at airmail.news/arts-intel, and be sure to sign up for our Week in Culture newsletter, which is published every Wednesday afternoon at airmail.news/WIC. I'm Chris Garrett, Airmail Deputy Editor, and I never leave home without it. Bon voyage.
Okay, Michael, we've had a lot of gravitas this week. Please let us transition us out of the real world and into the imaginary world of the arts. Give me something to take my mind off of it all.
Okay, I got something. I know I've been in a little bit of a Taylor Sheridan world, and I apologize to listeners, but who might think he's not so upper crust. But I got to say, I've heard a lot of talk recently from people I know about Landman. Do you know this show, Ashley?
2 words, Michael John Hamm. Of course I know it.
Okay, good. So Landman, for those of you who don't know, it's created by Taylor Sheridan, the guy behind Yellowstone and a bunch of other shows. And so as you probably know, it stars Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm, and it's set down in the world of oil drilling operations in West Texas. And I got to say, just for Billy Bob Thornton and John Hamm alone, it's pretty compelling. I'm only 2 episodes in. Got great drama, great pacing, great zingers. Have you watched it much, Ashley?
Unfortunately, I haven't, Michael. It's still on my watch list. I'm working my way through another very long series that we'll discuss in a minute.
Well, so what do you have?
Okay, well, I really need some escapism this week more than ever, and I have completely relaxed all my rules around weeknight television in the house for my children because my daughter and I are completely hooked on a historical drama series called Victoria, about Queen Victoria. Did you watch this when it came out?
That would be no. Not because I don't want to, but I don't even know about it.
Well, it's funny. I missed it too. It came out on PBS in 2017. It first aired here in the UK on ITV. And as I said, it was written by Daisy Goodwin, who's a screenwriter as well as a novelist. And it's all about Queen Victoria. And it begins when she was a teenager who sort of accidentally or kind of unexpectedly ascended to the throne. And I'm only on the first season right now, and it covers the years 1837 to 1840, her first efforts to become a monarch, including her friendship with her advisor, Lord Melbourne, who's played by Rufus Sewell, who's totally brilliant, and her marriage to Prince Albert of Germany, and then the birth of their first child, Princess Victoria. But it's such a wonderful show. It's really immersive. It stars Jenna Coleman as Queen Victoria, and she's incredibly beautiful and charming. And some of the subject matter is a bit advanced for my 9.5-year-old daughter. She now knows all about a house of ill repute and perhaps even what happens there. I hope not, but maybe. But it's a really interesting way of getting into that period in history. It's completely different from the times that we live in today, which is one really strong recommendation for it. But it's a wonderful show. If you've missed it, if you love Downton Abbey and are looking for something else to delve into a bit earlier, I really recommend it. It's called Victoria, and you can now watch it on Netflix.
Sounds great.
We would like to thank our sponsor, A24 and The Brutalist. Go watch it. Michael, will you please read us out?
Absolutely Morning Meeting is produced by Airplay Productions and edited by Jesse Cannon. Our co-editors are Graydon Carter and Alexander Stanley. Our chief operating officer is Bill Keenan, and our deputy editors are Ashley Baker, Chris Garrett, Nathan King, Julie Vitale, and Ash Carter. Our CMO is Emily Davis, and our music supervisor is Randall Poster. Our theme music is The Cute Monster by the Buddy Collette Quintet. A new edition of Airmail is published every Saturday, so please subscribe and enjoy all of our stories on airmail.news, which we update every day. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Airmail Weekly. We will be back here next Saturday with another edition of Morning Meeting. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe at Spotify or Apple Music. But most of all, thank you again for joining us.